Hey guys, today I want to talk about some of the best primaries in the game that I think a lot of people might not be using. And I know for people who have been following the channel, this is going to get memed a little bit because I've always historically not really liked primary weapons because for the purposes of ag clear mainly, special weapons are just better at doing that, and that hasn't really changed. But especially now with some of the new weapon archetypes we actually have a lot of very powerful utility primary weapons that achieve other things that special weapons just aren't able to do as effectively. So we're going to be talking about all of that and looking at some of the best primary weapons in the game for endgame and serious players. So really quickly, before we start listing off specific weapons, I want to point out what the purpose of a primary is in the current meta. I know a lot of people go after primary weapons as like their workhorse, primary ag clear weapon, however that has a lot of downsides. And ultimately, when it comes to ag clear weapons, pretty much special weapons are just always better. But we have had an important change recently. This week, Bungie released a patch which said that it patched the heavy ammo finders treating rocket sidearms like special weapons, but this also applied to other special weapons like the Risk Runner Ergo Sum, which means that using double special now does actually have the disadvantage of not being able to spawn heavy finder bricks very frequently. They do still spawn, however it takes 4 times as many kills approximately to get a heavy ammo finder brick to spawn from special weapons than it does with primary weapons. That being said, overall, it is important to remember that double special is still going to grant you more potent weapons overall for the majority of the time. However, there are some primary exceptions to this rule, and those are the primaries that we're going to be looking at today. And you'll notice a common trend among these weapons is that they are not really meant to be ag clear weapons, because you really just can't beat something like the Risk Runner Ergo Sum, or options such as Forbearance or Rocket Sidearms when it comes to their ag clear. So now that we know what primaries are going to excel at, let's go ahead and look at some of the best primary weapons in the current meta. And kicking this off, we'll talk about the no hesitations. I know a lot of the players that want to go into the full support build fantasy were very excited by this weapon to be able to have even more ways to heal their teammates, but I really don't think that's where this weapon shines. If anything, I think it shines by allowing you to have some useful support without having to have an entire build around it. So if your energy slot is open, you don't need anything else, you might as well just use the no hesitations as a great utility option. But what is the no hesitations? It's actually one of the more complicated weapons in the game, so we're going to go ahead and break it down. First of all, the no hesitations is a weapon which uses a new auto rifle frame type, the support frame. And the support frame is a 600 RPM, which is the same RPM as the adaptive frames. However, it is better in pretty much every way. The first thing making it better is that it actually just has more damage. This comes at the downside of having non-hit scan projectiles that have to track onto enemies, but the tracking is very strong, and in PvE it's not hard to just close the gap and shoot the bad guy. Now, outside of doing a little more damage than a weapon type that admittedly doesn't do very much damage, it has all of the benefits of providing the buffs that the support frame is able to offer, which is actually multiple. The way it works is you have this little bar around your reticle while you're holding the weapon, and you are able to fill it up by doing damage with either the weapon or your abilities. It fills very quickly, and it's very easy to fill it up fast to the max, and once you have energy on this bar, you could shoot your teammates while hip firing, and it will provide them with the buff. And the buff changes depending on the perks that you have on your weapon. So I was doing my research on this and looking at the Compendium to see exactly how it works. However, I realized there was a little bit of a flaw there. The weapon doesn't actually provide any sort of healing verb like restoration or cure unless you have the physic perk, which then makes it give restoration. Otherwise it doesn't give any, it just gives you the base 12 healing per pellet hit on the teammate. That said, I highly recommend physic because that adds 5 seconds of restoration. And restoration, as many people know, is one of the strongest healing verbs in the game, and 5 seconds of that is a pretty decent amount considering it's just coming from a legendary weapon that needed to land like 4 bullets on an enemy. And on top of this, it doesn't just apply to the person you shot it at, it applies to the person who shot it as well, so you can even use it as a panic button where if you're low on health, you just find a teammate, shoot them with it, get them healing, and you get the healing as well and can survive. While I do normally recommend running healing on your class that is adequate, some builds aren't able to do this. Things like Stasis Hunter, which you might be using to be able to shatter skate, won't have access to super potent healing. And there's also the benefit of being able to stack multiple healing verbs for excessive amounts of survivability to be able to face tank things and stuff like Grandmaster Strikes. So the healing is decent on its own, but now let's talk about that damage buff that I was telling you about. And this damage buff is extremely interesting. So the support frame damage buff is what's called a stacking damage buff, and being a stacking damage buff means that it is a global buff that can apply to any weapon, at least of a specific type. In this case, it is actually any weapon, and it is able to stack multiplicatively on top of regular global buffs such as Wall of Radiance or Lumina. What this means is that you've got an extra 10% multiplier on your damage on top of all the other buffs you already have. So this is a great way to just start off a damage phase where you just buff up your teammates while you're waiting on the animation, and then your initial damage is a little bit higher. And if you have any sort of damage breaks or you run out of ammo, you could spend that time buffing your teammates again so that they are doing more damage once more. This would also be a decent thing you can do as filler if you're waiting on something like auto-loading holster to proc. While the damage buff is mostly going to be something you would use in raid DPS, it's still nice to have the little bit of extra damage in roaming content as well. It definitely doesn't hurt, and you have that on top of being able to add restoration as long as you have the Physic perk. This weapon actually gets a lot of pretty effective rolls, however the one I use is Physic mixed with Frenzy. The reason I use Frenzy is just to have more reload and handling on the weapon at all times, and also a decent damage buff since it is able to do a decent amount of damage despite being a primary. So that was a lot of yap about the no hesitations. Let's go ahead and talk about something else, and this time we're going to talk about the Warden's Law. There is also an alternative in the form of the Mahi's Omelon hand cannon, which is another new double frame fire hand cannon, which is a world drop that came out in final shape. It is a little bit weaker in the perk department than Warden's Law, so I would recommend Warden's Law when possible, but if you do just have to have an energy slot weapon because your kinetic is taken by something important, you could certainly use the Mahi's to a decent effect as well. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to be talking about the Warden's Law because it is the main character. So the Warden's Law has some interesting properties that make it synergize with Lucky Pants extremely well. And outside of using it with Lucky Pants, I would not ever use this gun, otherwise it's basically just a regular hand cannon. So for those that don't know, the Lucky Pants buff is a 60% buff that you could stack 10 times up to 600% that applies to only hand cannons. On top of that, this is considered a stacking buff because it can stack on top of things like Radiant and Lumina. The main purpose that Lucky Pants is used for is bursting down majors in extremely hard content like Grandmasters, especially the harder Grandmasters where you're stuck being less aggressive than you might want to be. Currently we have a very aggressive Grandmasters meta, and so it's not being used as frequently. However, this is always a powerful fallback option for any sort of difficult content that doesn't have a very effective aggressive build. The other use is being total damage filler in damage rotations. In raid damage, a lot of setups might be very fast burning and be able to do high DPS but run out of ammo quickly, and the Lucky Pants is a great way to add infinite total damage with relatively decently fast delivery. It is worth noting that this doesn't really replace using special weapons, and especially not heavy weapons. However, if you are out of ammo or feeling lazy, it's definitely an okay option for delivering a decent amount of damage relatively quickly, and it scales up much better when it goes into harder content like Master Raids, or if it's ever not disabled, Day 1 raids. Overall, a much simpler weapon than the No Hesitations. However, it is very specific to hunters. If you're not using Lucky Pants on a hunter, it's not really that great of a weapon otherwise. It just does very high damage because it's able to proc the perk very quickly due to its double fire frame, making it the technical highest fire rate hand cannon in the game. So if you're going to go for the Warden's Law, I would recommend going for either Enlightened Action or Rapid Hit mixed with Vorpal Weapon. You used to go for 4 times the charm because you needed to use a boss spec on the weapon, but now that that is not the case, you can just use backup mag or even adept backup mag now that it doesn't have a handling deficit, and you can actually get enough magazine size just off of that to not need 4 times the charm anymore, so the extra reload and handling is nice. You need to have 26 shots in the magazine or enough ammo to do 13 bursts of the weapon to get the maximum value out of Lucky Pants. So as long as your mag size is 26 or more, you are set to go and you don't need to use 4 times the charm. And the last option on our list is going to be the Vulpecula as the main weapon. However, there are a lot of alternatives, and the purpose is Shoot to Loot. Shoot to Loot is a perk that we've been glazing on the channel for quite a while, so if you've been watching me, you know exactly why this weapon is on the list. But now more than ever, primary weapons with Shoot to Loot are probably at their best. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first one just being that we've been getting some new Shoot to Loot weapons that are pretty good. However, unfortunately, most of them are in the energy slot, and a lot of our DPS weapons that we want to use are actually energy weapons, so it is a little bit unfortunate in that regard, but there are still some decent kinetic options, namely the Vulpecula. This is a weapon that's going to be a little bit hard to get. You'll basically have to wait for Banshee to sell it, but we're going to talk about a number of alternatives that you can get in the meantime which are easier to farm. But first of all, let's talk about why Shoot to Loot is so good and what the best perks are to pair with it. When it comes to the Vulpecula, the absolute god roll is going to be Shoot to Loot mixed with Explosive Payload. This is because the splash of Explosive Payload is able to proc Shoot to Loot anywhere within that splash area, so it makes it super forgiving where you can just shoot the ground kind of near an ammo brick to pick it up, and you can even pick up several ammo bricks all at the same time with one shot. When it comes to min-maxing on the Witness, players will actually even push bricks into being near each other so that they can pick them all up in 1 or 2 shots more quickly during damage phase so that they can keep shooting, because they are just so cracked that they are running out of ammo during the Witness damage phase doing a full 2-weapon rotation. But even if that's not you, Shoot to Loot has a lot of great uses. If we look back on the Witness encounter, there are plenty of situations where you might not want to push up and pick up the ammo. The first one is that it's just kind of dangerous. There's a lot of scary ads, there are screebs that can kill you pretty quickly if you are near them when they blow up. You've also got the long leg boys who can kill you very fast with their darkness abilities that you often don't carry any resistance mods for. However, on top of that, you could also lure the triangle attack to be in an unfavorable position for runners. And you could circumvent all of this just by shooting the ammo from far away with a Shoot to Loot weapon, which is more viable than ever because most of our weapon rotations right now that are meta only use 2 weapons anyway, and so you have space to kind of use a utility third weapon. But if you don't have access to Vulpecula right now, there are a lot of other great options. You could go for the Shoot to Loot Explosive Payload Hung Jury from Onslaught. Remember, this perk combo is not available on the Nightfall version that you can get from Legacy Focusing. You would have to get it from Onslaught, and now that you're able to focus specific weapons from Onslaught again, this is a realistic thing to farm. But if you're not worried about Explosive Payload or you want to be able to shoot bricks out of the air effectively, you could use the new Veiled Threats auto rifle, which is a 720 RPM auto rifle with Shoot to Loot, and you could pair it with Desperate Measures as a nice little perk for just doing some damage with the gun. Veiled Threats is what I would consider to be the best Shoot to Loot kinetic option in the game when you're looking at a fast fire rate weapon. For example, because we don't have any trace rifles with the perk, then a 720 auto rifle would be the next fastest firing weapon with the perk. But many people will prefer the Explosive Payload Forgiveness for just shooting ammo on the ground, and the only extra benefit that the auto rifle really brings is being able to shoot the bricks out of the air, which can be a pretty niche situation. This would mainly just be for shooting bricks that are falling off the map, or if you killed an enemy that was floating over the void. Anyway, that's going to do it for the video for me. If you're still watching the video, I do want to quickly let you know I have a Discord server that I've been trying to get more members into. We have a lot of great channels, including a loadout link channel which actually has a ton of build links that you can use if you're looking for a new build. If that's something you're interested in, make sure you look in the description, I'll have a link to it down below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye!